Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about Miami just splattering Florida for 4 quarters in Gainesville on Saturday. It was an absolute domination, maybe the most impressive performance of the entire weekend. But let's get into Penn State and Georgia. Also, how you doing, Wolverine Gage? I am doing great because we're talking college football. That's all I need on a Monday. So it's going to be an incredible couple of weeks. But Georgia and Penn State gave us some really good performances on Saturday, and I want to jump into these. And we'll start with that Penn State game because this was one that a lot of people going in, including myself, was pegging this one as kind of a little bit of a battle. You're walking into Morgantown, West Virginia. You're facing a crowd that is going to be loud, is going to be rowdy, and Penn State didn't care about any of that. They came out there and they absolutely rolled over this team for 4 quarters. Even with a rain delay that was outright monsoon, they were able to pull this one off. So overall, the biggest takeaway is Andy Kotelnicki has made the biggest difference on this offense as you could possibly imagine. They are totally different. They let this team be who they are, which is you have an elite quarterback in Drew Aller. At least we're talking about arm talent. There is nothing he can't do on a football field. They're finally letting him do that. Harrison Wallace is getting open and being the special athlete that he can be. Nick Singleton is finally breaking runs again and doing the special things that he's capable of doing. There are so many awesome things to pull away from this game, and frankly, we'll get into them a little bit later, but Harrison Wallace taking over as the true wide receiver one for this team is as big of a development over this weekend as really any of them. It's absolutely huge for this team and definitely puts them in a position where now they're in really good spot for this Big Ten race, but obviously something we'll unpack throughout the season. But that rain delay definitely did play a factor in this game. It was an outright monsoon there for a minute, and it kind of took the crowd just entirely out of this game. Now, they were getting dominated before that, don't get me wrong, but this crowd was definitely a little bit sparse after that rain delay, and it definitely played a factor towards the end of this game. But the biggest reasons Penn State won, we talked about it. The Kotelnicki effect is very obvious. Last year, Penn State, I believe, had 8 plays over 40 yards the entire season. They had 4 of them yesterday. It was absolutely remarkable. They were able to push the ball downfield. They got Nick Singleton loose for a 40-yard touchdown, 55-yard catch by Amari Evans, a 50-yard touchdown to Trey Wallace on that beautiful ball from Drew Aller. It was remarkable to watch this team over 200 yards passing and rushing in this game. Everything went the way that you wanted it to go for Andy Kotelnicki's debut, and it's obvious why they made this hire, and it's obvious why Andy Kotelnicki is one of the fastest rising stars in college football right now. The other part of this that goes with Andy Kotelnicki is they let Drew Aller be Drew Aller. Last year you were watching this guy, and it wasn't frustrating because he was playing bad football, because he 29 touchdowns, 2 picks. He was very efficient throughout the year, just couldn't beat those 2 big teams, but I wanted to see him push the ball down the field. I knew he had elite arm strength. I knew he had elite arm talent. I wanted to see more of it, and we saw a ton of it on Saturday. He was able to throw incredible balls. The fade to Wallace for a touchdown. The post that we just talked about, that was outright incredible. A number of out routes and corner routes that he threw on a dime. It was really awesome to watch this kid go to work. Went 11 for 17, 216 yards, 3 touchdowns. Did everything that you needed him to do, and frankly, if he's going to get better from here, there's not going to be a lot of offense or defenses in the country that are going to be able to stop what he did on Saturday. So really impressive performance, did everything that you want him to do, and now it's just about continuing to build for that young man. The other part of this is stifling the run. We knew that West Virginia was going to come in here and run the ball, and if they weren't going to be able to do that, it was going to get ugly, and that's exactly what happened. C.J. Donaldson had 12 carries, 42 yards, and a touchdown. Jaheim White, 8 carries, 33 yards. Garrett Green, 10 carries, 5 yards. And we talked about it. That could have been the big equalizer in this game, is Garrett Green possibly getting out on a couple of big-time rushes. That didn't happen once. So really impressive from Tom Allen and this defensive staff to keep everything in front of them. The average yards per carry, 2.3. The long carry of the day was 12 yards. So it was just outright domination from start to finish on the lines of scrimmage for this team, and it's a good offensive line for West Virginia. It's not a slouch by any means. So definitely a huge performance, and one that Penn State can really build from, that's for sure. where they go from here, I think for West Virginia, it's just regroup, burn that tape, and move forward. It's really that simple. You still have the Big 12 in front of you. You still have Garrett Green that does need to play much better football going forward, but very talented player. You have Albany next week. You have at Pitt, and then you have two huge ones against Kansas and at Oklahoma State. So we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks for West Virginia. Definitely not the performance that they had in mind in week one, but I think they're still in good shape. They have some tough games in front of them, but they're still a team that absolutely can make some noise, and maybe Penn State is just a buzzsaw this upcoming year. And then on the Penn State side, this team looks the part. For the first time in quite a long time, they look the part of a team that not only can win a ton of the big-time games and go 10-2 and make the playoff, but maybe can beat Ohio State, maybe can win one of those playoff games, maybe can do some of those things that have eluded them over the past little bit and have kept them on that second tier of college football. So cannot wait to see what this team can do. They're pretty much in good shape till October 12th and when they go to USC for that one. If they win that one, then this is one of the most talked about teams in the country, and they are firmly in the college football playoff conversation. And it's going to look really interesting to see what they can do against Ohio State and the other big teams in this conference, because obviously that's the big time hurdle and something that they're going to have to deal with this upcoming year. But as of right now, it looks really, really good for Penn State. I can tell you that. Moving on to Georgia and Clemson. Beatdown, just an outright domination from start, not even from start to finish. This was from halftime to finish. It was an outright beatdown, and that was one of the biggest things. Whatever the halftime speech was from Kirby Smart was outright aggressive. I can promise you that. It worked magic on this team, and they went out and were dominant in the second half on both sides of the ball, but particularly on the offensive side of the ball. Carson Beck went to work in the second half. They allowed him to kind of spread out that defense just a little bit, get passing a little bit more often. 9 different players caught passes in this game, so everything went right for this team. And frankly, when the ball's in the hands of Carson Beck, a lot of things tend to go right for this team. And then we have to talk about what Malachi Starks does in Mercedes-Benz. I don't know what it is about him walking into that building, but he's given some type of power. It's some type of thunderstruck type situation where he touches something in that building and it gives him the power of probably 10 different DBs. He's absolutely insane and makes a crazy play on the ball pretty much every time he's in that building. So I don't know what it is. I don't know what happens in the gallows of Mercedes-Benz that makes him the player that he is in that building, but man, that kid can make some really remarkable plays on the football field. I'll leave it at that right now. But the reasons Georgia won, halftime adjustments were huge. Mike Bobo and this offense were running the ball really not effectively in the first half. The defensive line for Clemson was making a number of big-time plays. They weren't really spreading the ball out the way that they wanted to. And then on the second half, they came out 2 back-to-back 75-yard touchdown drives. Carson Beck was outright perfect throughout those drives, and everything was exactly the way that you wanted it to be. So it turned from a defensive battle to a beatdown very, very quickly. Elite players were getting open. The offensive line played so much better, and everything was better in the second half, really. So huge shout-out to the coaching staff over at Georgia, and gives you an idea of why they are the best team in the country. And then the Carson Beck show, 23 for 33, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns. His numbers are never going to beat you over the head. He's not that type of quarterback. This is not that type of offense. What it is this dude is as efficient as you could possibly be. Everything is right where it needs to be. All of the timing of every single play is exactly the way that you want it to be. And he got enough from his run game with a couple of key guys out in Trevor Etienne and Roderick Robinson. Nate Frazier, the freshman, showed up in a huge way, 87 yards, 1 touchdown, did plenty on the ground to give him those openings. But man, this guy comes out on the field with a confidence, with a swagger, and plays this game just so cleanly throughout the entirety of the game and has been doing it for quite some time. And frankly, he could be on his way to a Heisman Trophy type year. So it's remarkable to watch this guy play, and he just puts on a show every time that he's out there. But then defensive domination was a huge part of this. Georgia's defense that a lot of people were skeptical about coming in, especially the interior of that defensive line that had some issues throughout this game, but not many, I'll be honest with you. The long run of the day for Clemson was 9 yards, 1 pass over 20 yards. That was a ridiculous catch and a ridiculous pass, frankly, to Antonio Williams. Cade Klubnik, 18 for 29, 142 yards, 1 interception. Leading receiver had 76 yards. It was Antonio Williams. The next highest was Jake Burningstool. He had 26, and there was only 3 guys over 20 yards receiving. It was domination. Start to finish, this UGA defense was all over them, and we knew it was going to be a little bit weaker than 21 and 22. It might not be that much weaker. This is a very, very good defense, and if they can figure out that pass rush even more, it's going to be scary for a lot of teams they got to face. But where do they go from here? Clemson, this is a really confusing answer because it might just be you don't go anywhere this upcoming year and then you wait till the offseason and you hope that Dabo Swinney changes his ways and goes into the portal, and we'll get into that too a little bit more tomorrow. But overall, you have a lot of questions on offense. Cade Klubnik just has to take steps forward. He did not, at least obviously on Saturday, but at the end of the day, the good news is there's no more Georgia on your schedule. You have the ability to turn the page. App State does come to town next week. That could get a little bit sketchy, and then you have NC State at home. So it's not like they can take their foot off the gas pedal too much, but at least it's not the Bulldogs on the other side of the field. That makes you feel a little bit better. They're still a threat in the ACC, but this was a beating in the second half, and it makes me feel just a little bit worried about this Clemson team. And then on the Georgia side of things, it is exactly what Georgia is. At this point, they could win any number of games. And at the end of the day, on Monday, they go back to work. That's what this program has been for the last couple of years. And that's why every time they show up, they look as ready as anyone could possibly be for that game. So this was a message sender, no doubt about that. They let everyone know that they are still Georgia. No one's taken their place up top, but they still have a tough road ahead of them. They still have those games at Alabama, at Ole Miss, at Texas, and we'll have to figure out what happens. But at the end of the day, this is the best team in the country. They showed that in week 1 without any doubt, and they're moving forward into week 2 as the number 1 team in the country. So really remarkable performance in that second half for Georgia. For Penn State, that went about as smoothly as you could possibly have hoped if you're a Nittany Lion fan. So a couple of dominating performances there, but let's take our final break here. We are running a little bit long because of how much stuff went on this weekend, but let's get to our last segment. We'll do a little bit of a whip around, get to Friday night games. We'll get to the big upset, or 2 big upsets that happened this past weekend, and then we'll get to some teams that narrowly avoided upsets this past weekend. So we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.